Hey, everybody. We're here with the Dirt Trail Running Podcast, Coffee with Coaches. And today I'm here with Coach Reese and Coach Jacob. So welcome. And I'm Coach Loretta. So how are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Good. I'm doing pretty good. I just got back from a run. So I'm feeling pretty good. I have my coffee here. I have my water over in the corner and ready to talk with Jacob and stoked to get him back online.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what are you up
I
to?
ran this morning, plan on running again this afternoon. I'm currently at the foot store where I work also a few hours a week. So
Nice.
Just doing the daily stuff.
Nice. Well, you guys have beat me to it. I haven't ran, but I will be running. And today's my birthday. So,
Yay.
I almost got like a beverage.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Loretta.
Thanks. So I've been busy fielding calls and texts, so. So, all right. Well, we're excited to have Jacob on the show today. Jacob started coaching with us about a month or so ago, maybe less, somewhere in there, time flies. But we really enjoyed our first meeting with Jacob. And we really like to, when we bring on new coaches, really vet them and make sure that they're going to be a good fit for our team and that they have some great skills and knowledge. Because when people come to us, we want to make sure we're giving them top-notch coaches, right? And so Reese and I really loved our conversation with Jacob. Want to share it with all of you because he's a really great coach, and I think that wanted everybody in the community to get to know him a little bit better. So, and I'm excited because I'm on this with two people who are going to be running Tunnel Hill 100 this year, and it's going to be so exciting to watch that. So,
I gotta say, I texted Jacob a couple of days ago and was like, "Hey, I'm on." So for anybody that doesn't know, Chris Pugacco, I think is his last name. He goes by Crispy Dumpling on YouTube. He has amazing videos of like all the local races, like Kettle, Hennepin, Tunnel Hill. There's a bunch of them on there. So I was kind of dorking out online a couple nights ago, watching his 2021 Tunnel Hill video. Jacob ended up coming in third, right?
Yep.
Okay, coming in third. So if anybody wants to go see some cool videos of Jacob running with Taggart and with Zach Bitter and Phil Young, it's on Crispy Dumplings YouTube handle. Maybe we can link that in the show notes or something. But it's going to be great. 2023 is kind of, what I've been gearing up for. So it's going to be exciting to meet you face to face and race with you too.
Yeah. It's going to be a really fun one. 2021 was a really fun event too.
It was. I was at the finish line. It was incredible. I'll just kind of recap it from my experience. They had lost communication with the other aid stations, so they didn't know where the top three men were. Like they're somewhere between here and there, and we don't know who's in what position. So it was pretty exciting. I watched Phil come flying across this, finish line. Everybody's kind of expecting Zach, and then Phil comes across, and then Zach, and then it was just really exciting. So I'm excited to be back there this year.
Yeah, and that was one of the first times I actually might be the first time that three guys went under 13 hours in the same race. I don't remember, but there was something with that as well. So it was a pretty fun year.
Yeah, I think so too. And this year, the men's field is super stacked. So I'm really excited about that. And also excited, the race director, Steve Durbin, is going to be putting on Ornery Mule coaching logo on his race shirts this year. So that will be fun to have our logo on there too. So it's a great race, and we'll have a bunch of Ornery Mule people there. So I'll be cheering both of you guys on. So I'm just going to start out and just, Jacob, tell us about yourself, like your experience with running yourself and with coaching, just kind of highlight things so we can get to know you a bit.
Yeah. So I actually didn't start running until college. I ran some in, middle school and high school, did a few runs with my dad and things like that, but didn't really start competing or anything until college. I started in sophomore year, and I wasn't super competitive, as a lot of ultra runners have found. We're not necessarily the fastest when it comes to 8Ks and 10Ks and things like that. But I competed okay. And then we moved out to Phoenix and then came back to Charleston. And when I was in Charleston, I decided to try and do 100K, which the furthest I had been was a half marathon. Ran my first one. It was, I think that race is June 1st or May 31st. It's that last weekend in May. And I ran 13 hours for the 100K, and it was 90 plus degrees, like 5 miles worth of knee deep swamp and all of that. So it was a super brutal race, and I still pulled 13 hours, and I realized, you know, I could kind of go for more with this stuff. So then I ended up attempting a US team qualifier, which I massively failed at the Stinger the first time I ran 122 and a half miles. Met Joe Fegis along the way, who's been a really good help with ultra running for me. I remember one of the things that he said during that race is stop running in the middle of the lane. Always hug the inside of the lane. It's a shorter distance. And so ever since then, I always hug the inside of the lane when I run track ultras. But yeah, so that kind of started my journey for chasing US team qualifier, which I ended up hitting in 2020. I ran 159.16 at the Stinger. And that was with, I think, 80 people on the track. So I was running around people all day. And then the next year I ran Tunnel Hill, ran 12:54 and some change, and then ran Canal Corridor 12:42 and some change. And so that's kind of been my last 3 years and my main highlights. I ran some other stuff along the way, but those are my main ones. And I started coaching probably around the time I started after the Stinger, when I ran the 159, and started working with some people then, and started really diving in more on coaching philosophy and what works and what doesn't. And I ended up being coached by Brad Hudson, who's one of the top marathon coaches. Learned a ton from him, coached by him for a year and a half. He's heavily influenced by a guy named Renato Canova, who is also someone that I have studied a lot, because he is arguably the best marathon coach in the world. So who better to learn from? So yeah, that's kind of where I've come along as far as racing and coaching and what all that looks like.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. What I know about you is I first met you at Alexander County, and
Yep.
I was really impressed by the fact that, you know, you had really big goals that day, but you were smiling and having fun, and you had the best crew along the side, you know, with playing loud music and had big signs for you. I just thought that was really cool. And you were cheering on everybody, from people walking to the people at the head of the pack. And that is what kind of caught me to, you know, be interested in you. So I think that that's really cool. So I appreciate that. That's what I love about ultra community, is everybody's like cheering for everyone, you know, whether you're an elite pro athlete or if you're, you know, the back of the pack, you know, everybody's cheering for each other. So yeah.
I think something that stands out to me
one
too.
thing that I've noticed across the board with that too is the brain only knows what you tell it. So if you have a frown on your face, that's what the brain knows. If you have a smile on your face, that's what the brain knows. And it's the same thing when you cheer on others, because if you put a smile on their face, then that's what their brain knows. So they're going to go further because of that, and you're going to go further because of that. So it's all a team effort at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I love that. Reese, what were you saying?
I was just going to say a couple things that I've noticed about, you know, the past couple pieces you've had to share is that, like, like, you're just a super positive guy, and you definitely like elevate people around you, which is amazing. But B, like, I think some of the best ultra marathoners in the world have that tenacity that you do. And I love how you said that you like, and you fully own, like, hey, I massively failed at that 24-hour qualifier. And I think, you know, like, kind of just talking about like current happenings with UTMB, Jim Walmsley, first American male to win UTMB. He failed at that race a couple times and never went back, or never stopped going back to give it his all. Same with Western States. So I think it takes a special type of person like you to say, like, hey, yeah, like, I tried as hard as I could. I still failed, but that doesn't mean that, like, I'm not going to come back and keep pursuing. And I think that's big.
Yeah. I think I put in 6 or 7 attempts before I actually hit the 159. So it wasn't a slow, or it wasn't a long, it was a very long process. It wasn't a fast journey by any means.
Right. I love that. And I'm inspired by that, because that is a, you know, a huge goal of mine. I think Jacob and I share that passion of running 24 hours on the track. Call us crazy, but we love it and we keep doing it. And that is my goal. I would still love to be able to qualify for the team. So I'm going to continue to keep trying. You know, it takes a lot on those events. 24 hours is a super long time, right? To hold it together and make sure that everything falls in place on that day. And when that happens, it's amazing, right? When it's not, we
Yes,
just keep coming back for more. So, yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So we want to talk a little bit about your training thoughts and philosophies and kind of dig in a little bit. So I'm going to let Reese kind of take this piece. And, we're all a bit of probably running data nerds. So we could talk all day. So I'm going to let Reese start us out.
Absolutely. Jacob, one thing that I really wanted to ask you was how, so as coaches, it's definitely important that we describe to our athletes, what they should be feeling with different workouts. Just to make sure that they understand, hey, this is how my body should be feeling at this intensity. So how do you define some of the big intensities for your athletes? And how do you relay that information to them? So maybe we could go into what is easy pace, what is tempo pace, what is threshold pace, VO2 max pace. Kind of give us your philosophy on the aerobic continuum.
Yeah, for sure. So when I look at different zones or intensities, I generally break down the 3 main zones. One is low aerobic, one is high aerobic, and one is anaerobic. And then those break down into 2 each also. So on the low aerobic, you've got recovery and you've got base. So the majority of running is done at base. That should be a comfortable, easy pace that you can talk, you're not breathing heavy and things like that. When you step up above that, you get into zone 2 and 3, and those are going to be tempo and threshold. So tempo is going to be just above that, where you start to have some labored breathing. You can tell that you're doing work, but you're not swamping yourself. You're not digging yourself into a big hole. It's a steady pace that you're able to maintain. And threshold is going to be just to the point where you start to feel like the wheels are kind of wobbling a little bit. Then after that, you're going to get into more anaerobic type of stuff, whether it's VO2 max or sprint. I'm a huge fan of doing things like 10 by 100 meters for athletes, because when I build out base, I don't just generally focus on, well, how many miles can we get you to run in a week? I want that base to be also built around the speed that you're going to target for an event. And that speed, that top end speed has to be a certain amount before you're able to reach a certain speed for a longer distance. So that's going to fall into that sprint type of workout, which is going to be very hard, but it's normally very short. VO2 max is just below that, and it's in between threshold and sprint. So that VO2 max is going to be very labored breathing, very difficult, but manageable still, because we're going to give you long enough recovery generally to make it so it is sustainable. I had an athlete not long ago that I was running a workout with, and I could hear the little squeak in his voice or in his breath when he was breathing. And I told him that's that VO2 max breath. A lot of athletes will get that. They'll just get a little bit of a squeak where it's very difficult to get in enough oxygen when you're running that VO2 max. And that's what we want toward the end of those intervals, not all the way through. So that's generally how I break down those zones. And then I'll aim to manipulate those zones throughout a training block so that we target whatever your specific race is, specific intensity.
I love that you answered all of those questions about the intensities and kind of gave descriptors of them. And you even kind of touched into periodization. I think that's a really awesome idea that you definitely brought to us. When we were interviewing you and talking with you about your philosophy about speed reserve. Let's say if your top velocity is 9 minutes a mile, how do you expect to hold 8:45s for an entire marathon to kind of get this picture of where your aerobic zone is? So I like that idea of it's this play of not just getting as many volume or as many miles as you can, but also keeping that speed up so that way we can make those faster base miles obtainable for your longer distance goals. Right. So I think that's beautiful.
And that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see new runners make is when they go out, and I'll have people who say, yeah, I'm not good at running. I can't run, but they went out and they tried to run way faster than they should have. And of course it was really painful and it wasn't fun, and they don't want to do that anymore because they're not good at it. Right. But everyone's done weightlifting. So I like to kind of relate it to that, because if you can only curl 10 pounds once, then why do you think you can curl 9 pounds 15 times? You have to raise up the amount of weight that you can lift before you can lift a smaller amount of weight more times. And it's the same thing when it comes to running. You're just using your entire body. So.
Yeah, I like that. So, being sometimes people look at professional runners, elite runners, being a little intimidated by being coached by them. Like, I'm not fast. Why should I pick a coach that's fast? Will they understand me? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know you have experience coaching all different levels of athletes. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I generally don't think that we have to go by specific distance when we target an event. So what I mean by that is the intensity that you're going to be able to run for 6 hours is the same intensity that I'm going to be able to run for 6 hours. I might run 50 miles in 6 hours, and you might run 30, but it's going to be the same intensity. Different distance. That's why when I train marathon, I'm not training for 26.2. I'm training for what it should be that you can run in that amount of time. So that might take you 4 hours. I'm training you for a 4-hour race. It's not a 26.2 mile race. And that's really important, because now we can break down those zones that we explained earlier and say, well, how long can you spend in each of these zones? And we can do that in multiple different ways. People have used power, people have used pace, people have used heart rate. There are any number of ways that you can break down what intensity you can run. And back to the weightlifting analogy, using power, it shows you that same type of thing. It's just showing you in a measurement of watts how much you're lifting and how long can you lift that amount of weight. So when it comes down to that, we're able to look at what intensity you can handle. And I might do 3K repeats in a workout, whereas it might be 20 minutes for you to do those same repeats. But I'm not going to have you run 20 minutes when I'm doing 15. I'm going to adjust it where you're running 15 minutes because that's what's appropriate for you. So the biggest thing by time run, which is a huge difference, and it's intensity based, not pace based.
Right.
I like that intensity, almost that RPE, and I think it goes to that old adage, that we or I guess the marathon community has is, like, it doesn't get easier, you just get faster. So like, a 7 out of 10 intensity for me is going to be a 7 out of 10 intensity for you, but depending on our terrain, like how fast are we actually going to be going? So I think that's interesting. And then is that a good synopsis? And then like based on that, now we look at like what your distance of event is and about how long it should take you, and then structure your plan accordingly. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Exactly. Yeah. And I've found that for those that want to reach, those who have the time for one and want to reach optimal performance, I've found that I think 17 to 17 and a half hours of training is ideal in a week for the biggest weeks. Most people don't have time for that. So we're not looking at, are we able to build out even the amount of time to be the most that we can? But when it comes to that, can we also structure in maybe threshold more? Because a threshold intensity builds points, so to speak, faster than a easy intensity, right? So we can kind of cram that time down into a shorter amount of time that's manageable for you. Main thing we have to watch out for is making sure we're not overdoing it, which can lead to overtraining and things like that. That's a major thing. I would much rather run too many easy miles than too many threshold miles. So, but yeah, fitting all of that into the right amount of time for you to target whatever distance and time it's going to take you to run that distance.
Beautiful. I love that. I think that's absolutely That's absolutely brilliant. And it's a great way to take into consideration everybody's life circumstance. It sounds like, you're not just looking at a person's goals, but you're looking at like a person's availability to train for that particular goal, right? Like you said, it would be ideal if everybody in their peak weeks could, get 15, 16, 17 hours of training, but that's negating the fact that we have lives, we have wives, we have kids, like we have other obligations and work. Like, so I think that's beautiful. Okay, so we kind of talked, and you kind of gave you gave a little bit of illumination as far as like what types of workouts you like. You talked a lot about meters. We know that you're like you specialize in the track and in the flat and fast stuff. So kind of give us like an idea of like what your favorite races are, like what you like, what types of workouts you like to structure for your athletes, and kind of get into that for us.
Yeah, for sure. The types of races that I gravitate most toward would be either track or something like Tunnel Hill. Canal Corridor was a great one too. They're flat and fast. I like being able to know, especially on the track, that the only person I have to blame is myself. I think I pulled that quote from Zach Bitter. But the only person that I can blame for slowing down, or only thing I can blame, is myself, because I'm on a perfectly flat loop. If I slow down, it's not because I went up a hill. It's not because of anything except for me. So it takes everything out of the picture, and it just lets me focus on what I'm capable of doing. Now, the type of workouts that I generally do for that, I'll focus on extending the amount of time or distance we can hold a certain speed. So generally, like we do that 10 by 100 meters, I won't try and extend that speed very far, because you're probably only averaging 5K pace on that. You're going to start and speed up through that 100 meters to max speed, but it's not a super far distance. So you're only going to average around 5K pace.
Oops, I think we lost him.
Beautiful. Jacob, do we have you? Okay, so Loretta, while we're waiting for Jacob to come back, I think that like his philosophy and his structure is super inclusive of a lot of people, and I think like a lot of our community is going to find good connection with him, just because he's got such a good like holistic view. Oh, there he is, Jacob. We were just talking about you. I was talking about how I like your holistic view of training, and kind of thinking about the holism of the aerobic continuum, whether it's top speed or whether it's forever pace.
Right, which
For
can be
sure.
applied to all runners, right? It can be applied to people that are podiuming, middle of the pack, back of the pack. It can apply across the range. It's not limited to, elite runners, right? I mean, we can use
For sure.
range. So
yeah. So yeah, I don't know where my video cut out, but I'll generally focus on moving through, getting into the 10 by 100 meters, which you'll generally average around 5K pace in, because you speed up throughout that 100 meters from a fast pace to a max effort pace. But they're over pretty quick, so you normally average around 5K. And I'll generally focus on working in tempo and threshold and VO2 max. And I'll try and space those apart with at least 2 rest days, depending on how hard the workout was. Tempo doesn't always require 2, but threshold and VO2 max normally will. And we'll focus on extending the amount of time you can do that. So we might start with 30 seconds on and 30 seconds recovery for VO2 max. And then we might work on building that to 3 minutes on with 3 minutes of recovery. But we'll do that over time, and the amount of time generally will be the same. So if I have you do 12 minutes of volume of 30 seconds, then that means I'm having you do that 24 times. Whereas once I get you doing 3 minutes, then we're only doing it 4 times. So we're just extending the amount of time that you can handle that intensity in one given period, and making sure we have appropriate rest in between. And we'll work in tempo, threshold, VO2 max in different ways, and work on building that out. That way you can manage that pace, whatever pace you're targeting, in the least painful way possible.
So what are your thoughts on strength training?
I think strength training is 100% beneficial. Specifically for the hips. I didn't know if I paused again. Sorry. Specifically for hips, I'm a big fan of mobility in particular. I have a mobility cycle that I personally use with like hip swivels and different things like that, which isn't just necessarily strength. It does target that a little bit because those muscles tend to turn off, so to speak. When we do strength or mobility, we help turn them back on and re-engage them. We make sure that we keep things in alignment when we do strength. It's one of the areas I neglect more than I should, but it's very important because we need to make sure that we keep things in alignment. Otherwise, we're going to be overpronating, or we're going to end up with some back issues and things like that, or we may end up with a muscle strain, things that set us back in training. And like where I'm competing now, if I do something where I have a muscle tighten up too much and I have to take a day or two off, that means that my competition just caught up a day or two on me. So I have to make sure and keep myself healthy so that I don't set myself back. If I'm wanting to reach as far forward as I can, I have to make sure that I'm prepared, make sure I'm focusing where I need to focus along the way.
Nice. So how do you kind of work those things, the strength and mobility, into an athlete's plan?
Yeah, so generally I'll have one strength workout that's kind of like a whole body type of workout, and I actually use that one for recovery. So after hard workouts, I'll prescribe that. And there's a guy named Joel Jameson. He's worked a lot with MMA fighters, actually. And he's been huge in the recovery area and how do we recover. And you can kick the body into a recovery mode by doing 10 push-ups and resting for 30 seconds, doing that a couple of times, doing squats and then resting for 30 seconds in between sets and things, and then doing some breathing after, or yoga type stuff with some breathing after, and it kicks the body into a recovery mode. So I like doing those after hard workouts. After sprints and things like that, I'll generally work in mobility because it's a good time to relax the muscles after the workout. It's super important. And then as far as stability, I'll normally do those after long workouts. So workouts where you've fatigued everything and you need to teach the body to engage properly. That's the time to do stability. So generally, if I do a hard workout on Wednesday, a long workout on Saturday, then it'll be a full body strength workout on Wednesday and stability on Saturday. And then Monday, we might run sprints, 10 by 100 meters, and that'll be a mobility day. I also like doing mobility after hill workouts because they engage the hips so much more. So that's generally how I structure that.
Right. You know, I like that you mentioned hill workouts. Reese and I have a podcast that we kind of talk about hill running, and also do we need to have hill running when we're running flat events? And so we've had, some conversations. So do you want to share anything about your thoughts about hill training? And because you are preparing for a lot of, track events or flat fast courses.
Yeah, well, and Tunnel Hill is flat, yes, but I am having to make sure and put structured hill training in for that in particular, because I know that it's roughly 8 miles up at a slight grade, and then I've got 2 miles down and then 2 miles back up, and then I go down. And then I do that again later in the race. So I know that I have to prepare for that. No course is flat. No course is flat. So you always need to have the strength there. So what I'm doing right now is I've been building out 200-meter hills. So those are not necessarily, those are run more at 5K effort. So they're just below VO2 max. So they would generally be considered low VO2 max, high threshold type workouts, depending on how long I do the recovery for. And I'm building those to like a 12 by 300 meter. So those are going to be run faster than 5K effort once I get to that 300 meter. And that's where the strength is going to come from. In Charleston, we don't have hills. So I have to get creative with that. But it's super important. And I'll generally do that once every 2 weeks, just because it's more of a maintenance build strength than it is I'm going to run UTMB, right? Which is very different. So that's where I generally focus on that type of thing. There is value in doing aerobic hills, which would be longer, closer 4 to 5 minute type of hills, but I haven't generally used those myself. I haven't had a need.
Right.
But that's something that could be incorporated for those that are doing much longer sustained running uphill, if you're going to be running consistently. Or power hiking.
Right. Right.
Jacob, I love that. And I'm finding a lot of parallels between like your and my coaching styles. And I just had an athlete who is also going to be running Tunnel Hill 50. And, you know, like we're just far enough out that he loves running trails. And like, that's like his bread and butter. So like on the weekends, like he wants to get into the woods, like he wants to be specific and prepare for a race, you know, but being, you know, just a little over 8 weeks out, I was like, you know what, on the weekends, like, go do the hills, go do the trails, get some incline, get some decline. It's all good. We're not so close to the race that you need to be hyper specific. But what I love about those hills going up is that like you can get a lot of power out of your legs without a lot of that like eccentric hamstring pulling type of reaction that you can get from doing just completely flat strides or completely flat intervals. But also you build a lot of durability, even if it's for a flat race, because if you're, you know, chugging away like uphill, you're going to be working your cardiovascular system a little bit more. You're going to be getting your hip flexors a little bit more because a little bit more knee drive. And everybody's probably felt that feeling at the end of an ultra where you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't lift up my knees anymore. But also
Right.
the downhills, you know, you get some of that quad building. And even though like in a lot of flat races, we don't go like, you know, we don't go like downhill for too long or at too steep of a grade. Just like even flat running with speed can be taxing on the quads. So I feel like there's a lot of crossover with hill work and flat races too. So I'm actually really glad to hear that you're doing some hill work too, because that's something that I'm keeping in my tunnel hill prep type of program. So I think that's beautiful.
Well, and one of the things that, y'all still have me?
It's a little bit broken up.
There we are. Now can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Yeah, that's one of the things that like elite marathoners will focus on a lot too, is once they're done with a marathon, they'll jump back into strength training first thing, and then they'll build out strength in their training first thing once they start back. They'll normally take around 2 weeks of recovery and then start building into a lot of power and strength type training. And the reason they say is because they lost all of their strength as they transitioned to flat. So if we look at specific 201-39, that was a very flat course, but he didn't do all of his strength training right before the race. He did his strength training after his last marathon to rebuild it. And then he lost that strength and built speed throughout his block. So that speed is what was specific for his marathon. The strength wasn't specific. So he built that on the front end and funneled it down to the marathon.
And I think too, us ultramarathoners. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you good?
No, you're good.
Yeah. I think too, like us ultramarathoners, like we never, like hardly ever just have one event that we want to target for in the year, or 2 events. Like most of my athletes will be like, hey, there's the pop-up 50K 2 weeks from now. Can I do it? Like, I know I want to like target this race or whatnot. So I think that just as ultramarathoners, like we might be like focusing on one particular race, but we still kind of need to like keep all of our tools not completely sharp, but at least like keep familiarizing ourselves with, okay, we might be focusing on a flat race, but let's throw in a couple hills, because maybe in 6 months or in 4 months after that flat race, I want to go back into like a hilly race or something like that. So I think keeping all those tools not rusty, I guess, is
Right.
pretty cool.
I think that if I lived where I had more hills, that I would probably start doing all of my easy runs on undulating terrain.
Mhm.
Just because that's what would maintain that, like what you're saying, very specific with my pacing. Because the more specific I am with my pacing, the more specific I am with my physiology. So when I want to target certain intensities, whether it's by pace or heart rate or whatever it is, power, I can be very specific with that. And when I'm running easy on the trails and hills and things like that, I can kind of let my legs build their strength, and I can keep my heart rate and enjoy myself, all of that. So I definitely think that that's one thing. If I didn't live in a pancake flat city, that's probably what I would gravitate toward.
So Loretta, I think we dove
But
into training philosophy fairly well here. Is there anything else that you want to know, or Jacob, is there anything else that you want to kind of leave with in coaching philosophy?
I have one more thing. So Jacob is also a race director, and he has a couple of 24-hour events or hour timed events on tracks coming up. And I was invited to the one in February, which I'm super excited and hoping I can get past all my niggles and can be there for the Raven. But would you like to talk to us a little bit about the races that you have coming up? I know Ornery Mule is sending a care package for a raffle. I send a package through Ultra Crazy Runner. So trying to also raise some money for autism. So do you want to share a little bit about that?
yeah, for sure. So we started the Raven because it was a last ditch effort for me actually to try and qualify for. Can you hear me?
You're breaking up a
Am I
little
still
bit.
there?
Yep, you're here, but breaking up a little.
Okay. Yeah, it was a last ditch effort for me to try and qualify for the U.S. team. We got Camille Heron out to go for world record. She ended up setting age group world records and for the 100 and some different things. It was a great event. It was our inaugural event this past February. We didn't want to, we had a lot of support for that race, and we didn't want to make it so that everyone who supported us would not be able to run the Raven, right? So we decided to put on another race in October. It's called the Midnight Dreary. And so it's kind of like the prelude to the Raven. The Midnight Dreary is one of the first lines, or Once Upon a Midnight Dreary is the first line in the Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. So we kind of stuck with that theme. And we got in contact with Low Country Autism, local organization in Charleston, and we'll be supporting them with 10% proceeds. Hopefully we're able to get 60 runners because we're able to increase that to 20%. So that's a major goal of ours. We want to fully fund their parents' night out, which is where they're able to have their parents go out and everything, and have all of that fully funded. So that's our main goal. But we are doing a 6-hour, 12-hour, and 24-hour at the Midnight Dreary. It's an all-comers, so anyone's able to come out and have a good time. We just got a cotton candy machine, so we'll be able to do cotton candy. We have a full, which is something you don't generally see. You generally have to bring your own tent and all of that. So that's kind of what the Midnight Dreary will be. It'll be a very fun race, but it can be as competitive as you want. So we are eligible for rec. If you're going for a team qualifier, make sure that we fall within. But then the Raven, probably 30, 40 runners to come out, hoping to get a bunch of those. We do have qualifications listed on the Ultra sign up page for it, but it will be specifically for people who want to set records, people who want to qualify for teams, people who want to go as fast as they can. And that's why we have as an people who are going to be somewhat similar in pace keep the field relatively small. That way we don't have to do a lot of passing and that type of stuff. And that's how that'll be structured. So there'll be two distinctly different events. But they'll both be really, really fun to watch, all of that. And hope you can make it out.
Yes, I'm hoping so too.
Can you hear me still?
It's on my calendar. Just trying to be patient.
Jacob, maybe if we could have you turn off your video too, it might help the audio.
Let me see.
So Jacob, is there anything else that we missed that you wanted to highlight about yourself as a coach?
Not right now. I like helping everyone reach their goals is the main thing. So whatever goal that may be, it may be just to get more fit. It may be to go out and absolutely crush an event. Whatever it is, I like to help people achieve their goals. I like to help people find more within themselves than they thought they had. One of the things I've been stuck on lately is I've seen some studies where they've worked with kids, and kids who stopped short of a goal were more likely to stop that amount short or more in the future for anything else they do. Whereas if they meet their goal or exceed it, they're more likely to meet or exceed their goal in the future. So there's a direct correlation to that for running or other sports or work or relationships. It all kind of ties together. So I've been really big on how can we help you reach goals, because that's going to help you in every area of life, not just can I run a 100-miler. Hopefully it'll help with relationships. It'll help with jobs. It'll help with multiple other things that we do on a day-to-day basis. So that's one of the things I've been big on lately. I hope that's helpful for other people.
Jacob, I think that was a beautiful wrap up. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think you're a standout athlete, a standout coach. We're very excited to have you on the team. If anybody out there in the community is interested in working with Jacob, we do have him on our website. You can also contact Coach Loretta, myself, or send us an email. Hit us up on Facebook. Hit Jacob up on Facebook, his Instagram, all those social handles. We will have those linked. So yeah, get started with him, get working on your goals, and crush life. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and we have a little
Absolutely.
bit special offer right now for Jacob. So Ornery Mule Coaching is trying to fill the map of the US with athletes across the country. And so for anybody listening from South Carolina that is interested in coaching with Jacob, he's offering the first month half price for a limited time. So that would be somebody, a brand new athlete to Jacob from South Carolina. So if you are from there and you reach out, just let us know and we will get you hooked up with a code so you can get half off the first month. And I think that's a wrap for today.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. And of course, we'll be talking more, but I'm super excited again to be able to watch the two of you compete at Tunnel Hill. So that should be an exciting day. We also have Coach Lindsay that will be there and Coach Scott that will be racing. I think Coach Matt's going to be there. There's a huge group. Michelle is racing on that day too. So it's going to be a fun Ornery Mule takeover at Tunnel Hill this year. So hopefully we'll see a bunch of our listeners out there as well. So, and if we do, stop up and say, by and say hi to us. So, or cheer them in as they go by. All right. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
See you guys.